Welcome to the Magdalene Voices, giving voice to those silenced for centuries through sacred conversations with beautiful, illuminating souls. I'm your host, spiritual business coach, mentor, catalyst, and facilitator Mariaestela. I serve spiritual entrepreneurs, Magdalenes Rising, and radiant beings just like you with the expansion and growth of yourself and your business, aligning you with your deep inner truth, bringing to life that which you're here to birth, and supporting you in expressing your soul's divine purpose through your being and your doing in this lifetime. If you haven't already, I highly encourage you to join my newsletter to stay connected and updated. You can do so on my website, Mariaestela.com, where you can also find previous episodes and their show notes. And if you have ever wondered about your Magdalene connection and calling, and whether you are a Magdalene, I invite you to download the free Magdalene blueprint I've created for you. Go to Mariaestela.com/AYM to get it. Finally, if you're a soul-driven, heart-based spiritual entrepreneur, don't forget to check out my new podcast, Spiritual Business with Mariaestela. It's designed to inspire you, empower you, guide you, nurture you, and activate you. You can find it on YouTube as well as everywhere podcasts are broadcasted, or simply click the link in the show notes. Okay, Radiant One, get ready for what is going to be a powerful and deep episode of the Magdalene Voices. I can feel and sense like I'm not fully sure what's going to come through me, but I can feel the undercurrents of the goddess moving within me and within you. And I know that this is going to be powerful and healing and transformative for a lot of you who are listening in. So the name of this episode is Are You a Magdalene? And that is a beckoning call that is also part of the Magdalene blueprint that I've created for you. If you don't already have the Magdalene blueprint, it is free and you can go ahead and download it on my website. You can go to mariaestela.com/AYM. And you may want to pause where you're at and go grab it before we move on, although it's not necessary. So there are three things that I want to dive into. Number one is, what is a Magdalene? Number two are the Magdalene precursors. In the Magdalene blueprint, you'll find 28 precursors, and I can sense that there is an upgrade or an update coming on soon. So by the time that you hear this, there may be more or there may be less. But at time of the recording, there's 28. I won't be going into all 28. I'll be going into just 5 of them, which is again why, if you want to dive deeper into this work, I encourage you to download the blueprint. And finally, I'm going to go into the Magdalene Rising, what I call the Magdalene Rising. But before I do any of that, I just want to start out by answering the beckoning call, Are you a Magdalene? If you're here listening to this, whether it is your first time listening or it is your 30th time or 50th, OMG, I'm just realizing that this is actually the 50th episode. I get goosebumps all over now. This is actually the 50th episode of the Magdalene Voices, and I am trying not to get wet eyes because this is just so powerful. Okay, so this is the 50th episode of the Magdalene Voices, and whether you have been with me from the beginning or whether this is your first one, if you have come into this space, let me just say this. Yes, you are a Magdalene. And in the show notes, I'm going to be including some episodes that deal with, living as a Magdalene and what to do when Magdalene, if the Magdalene shows up and all that. So know that if you go to the show notes, there'll be more avenues for you to dive deeper. But let's go back to the three things that I wanted to go into today, which are: what is a Magdalene, the Magdalene precursors, or at least 5 of them, and then the Magdalene Rising. So, to me, a Magdalene is someone who has made or is currently making the journey from their minds into their hearts, wanting to live, be, and do from that space. It is someone who has awoken to the truth of, quote unquote, what's going on, and how a lot of the world is based in fear and will no longer be subservient to that. It is someone who will no longer be subservient to the idea of patriarchy, to the idea of injustices being done in the name of race, and societal structures being put in place to elevate and further one group of people based on their skin color, on their religion or faith, on their sexuality, on their gender, who will no longer allow for that. And that's not to say to ignore and suppress by spiritually bypassing. I will include a link to the episode I did recently on the ways that I have been spiritually bypassing in the past. So that's not it. It is someone who has come to the place where their own personal work, that they've done, you've now realized that work is not just for you, it's for the collective. And so you are choosing to be part of the solution, knowing that love is the way. And knowing that love does not mean sitting down, doing nothing, praying and meditating for things. It is about adding action. Something that is called to my attention was the horrible terrorist and white supremacy attack on Muslims in Christchurch in New Zealand, and how the Prime Minister of New Zealand, within less than 10 days, put out a ban on assault weapon. It's a full scale. That to me is a very, very powerful example of love in action. It is saying we will not stand for this, and we will add action and remove those weapons. So to be clear, again, it is not about, and I meditate on a daily basis, I pray on a daily basis, but I also take action on a daily basis. So love is the way for a Magdalene. And in the blueprint, you'll find this as well, but historically speaking, the Magdalene is considered to be, quote unquote, Mary Magdalene. However, as we went over in an earlier episodes, there were loads more Magdalenes. The word Magdalene derives of the word Magdala, meaning tower, meaning the elevated one, meaning a teacher. So, in fact, it is a title, just as Yeshua was called Yeshua of Nazareth, I believe the Nazarene. That is a title as well. That means the anointed one. He was anointed by Mary Magdalene. So being a Magdalene or is a title, and it means to be a teacher. To me, it's also being a leader, and it means being of service to the world and its people. That to me is what a Magdalene is. So in that, I just included both the historical and you can go deeper in the blueprint. And I also included the soulful. To me, the Magdalenes are a group of consciousness. It's a group of ascended masters and souls that have that are still here and here to support the world in its awakening, its healing, its transformation, and its elevation out of fear and into love. And the reason why so many of us are being called is because the codes of what Yeshua and Mary Magdalene came to insert more than 2,000 years ago, the codes of that are still ingrained within the soul DNA, within the structure of both the planet, but also of the souls that come here with that purpose. And like I said, if you've been called into this show and podcast, you're a Magdalene. There's no question about it. And that doesn't have anything to do with what you do in your life. It doesn't really matter. It's about your heart and your choice to be of service. So that's what being a Magdalene is to me. There's of course much more than what I'm sharing here, but those are the core essences. It's the final thing I want to say. It's also about merging your divine feminine and divine masculine, which is something that I think or believe that Yeshua and Mary Magdalene did beautifully. They were both the external image of the divine feminine and the divine masculine as an example, but they were also an example in terms of their internal work. So when I say divine feminine and divine masculine, I do not assign a gender to that. I know that people of a non-gender or who has another idea of gender and don't necessarily relate to a specific gender as I do, struggle with the word divine feminine and divine masculine. And to me, at least that's because very often it's being put into these boxes where it's being gendered, and I don't see the divine feminine or the divine masculine as being gender, meaning that we each and every one of us have the divine feminine and the divine masculine essence within us, and it is for us to marry those two, creating the hiragamas, the sacred union, the divine marriage, and that through that create, be, and do in the world. And that is through us. I have a whole episode about the divine feminine and the divine masculine essences, and I'm going to include that in the show notes as well. So it's about marrying those two, those two, and the world that we've lived in for centuries. And again, this is the reason why I believe that Yeshua and Mary Magdalene came. The way that the patriarchy was going, there was a clear suppression of women, and of the divine feminine as well, and that's been continued, and you see it throughout, especially the Catholic Church, the results of what happens when you disavow one part of yourself, when you do not allow for the divine feminine to be an equal part both within your structure as an organization or a church, but also within yourself. And you see that in the horrible crimes that priests have committed towards children, and it's just unreal. And to me, that's the result of that. It's not an excuse, but to me, that is the result of that suppression and ignoring. So when you disavow or ignore one part of yourself, and in terms of, because I am a spiritual business coach, and I work with spiritual, heart-driven, soul-based entrepreneurs. And I see that as well, that when you begin to disavow, whether it be your divine masculine, because a lot of soulful entrepreneurs disavow or suppress, ignore their divine masculine essence, not knowing or wanting to have that part of themselves be the driver, but are deeply connected with their divine feminine. And I see what happens when you do that. So it's about I'm not necessarily saying finding a balance, because it's a continued dance. Sometimes you need more of one and then the other. So it's the yin and the yang. It's a continued dance, is what I like to call it. So that is what being a Magdalene means to me. And as always, I invite you to take what serves you and leave the rest. I'm not here to force feed you my truth. I'm here to show up, share my truth, and then it's up to you to really allow that to stir, simmer, and again, take what serves you and then leave the rest. Now, in terms of the Magdalene precursors, like I said at the time of this recording, there are 28. I'm going to go into just five of them. And if you want the rest, go ahead and download the blueprint. It's free. There'll be a link in the show notes for it. So the first one, and I'm using this, excuse me, because it seems to be where we all start. And I see this in, basically everyone that I meet or everyone that I work with. And that is that you've had what I call a rough childhood in some way, shape, or form. And that rough childhood means that you've seen things that, no child should see. You've had experiences that no child should have, whether or not that includes abuse in some form. And abuse can be different. There are different forms of abuse. It can be, mental abuse. It can be physical abuse. It can be psychological abuse. It's not just sexual abuse, because that's, of course, possible as well. But it means that there are different avenues. So to take me, for example, my father in my early childhood was an alcoholic. I didn't know that until very late on in my life, because it's something that I had actually suppressed, I suppose. However, and my father was also mentally unstable. And back in the 70s and the 80s, mental health and was not something that you talked about openly. So that was, of course, put under the rug, suppressed. And as a child who's very intuitive, which is also one of the precursors for a Magdalene, as a child, you can see this and you don't understand, like, why is this a secret? Why is this? Because to you it's quote unquote normal or natural. That's the way you've grown up. And so you will have had a rough childhood in various degrees. And for me personally, my father has been quote unquote one of my most powerful teachers, in the way that because I felt insecure in my home, because I was on a daily basis having to look out. I was on a daily basis trained in my intuitive senses, meaning I was always making sure, checking in, what is the level of his mood? Am I and my sister, I had a baby sister, are we in any quote unquote sort of danger? Will he be angry with us? Or I don't want to say, I wasn't physically abused, and I didn't have I wasn't smacked around quote unquote a whole lot. He did at times hit us, but it wasn't very often. So on a daily basis, I was trained in terms of how to make sure that, staying at the right level. That is, that intuitive skill is something that I use today, both, in my personal life, but also in my business. When I work with clients, I'm very easily able to tell whether or not they are bullshitting me and to be bullshitting themselves. So I'm able to discern and say something's not right, something's not going on. I once had a client that she was taking action. She wasn't taking action in an area that wasn't making sense to me, and I kept asking her, like, this, there's like, I hear what you're saying, but it doesn't make sense. There's something underneath it. And eventually she shared that she was actually pregnant, and or she thought she might be pregnant. It's like, well, either you're pregnant or you're not. So or she was, I think she said she might have been slightly pregnant, and I'm like, you can really be slightly pregnant. You can either be pregnant or you're not. But in that sense, it made sense for the reason she wasn't taking action, why she wasn't taking action, except that was based in it was based in fear. And once we unraveled that and got her set on path on taking aligned and decisions, that actually propelled her business. Like, she abandoned a partnership she was in. She started out on her own, and it took off like nothing else, even while she was pregnant and even while she was creating a baby, basically. So having a rough childhood, and if you're someone who's still in the place where your childhood is something that brings you deep pain and triggers you, know that that's okay. And I want to encourage you to, and it's such a touchy subject because it's not about suppressing what went on, it's not about ignoring, but it's about unraveling it so that it comes to a place where you're able to find the lessons and actually allow those lessons to uplift you rather to drag you down, which is something that can be really, really difficult. I understand that. For me personally, that has been in terms of my mother. I thought I had everything in place, and then one time in a session or during my coach training, I realized why I had such an aversion to my mother, and for her standing there looking at this, not seeing it, not doing it. And that has then been a process, of course, for me as well. So one of the precursors that I see in a Magdalene is that you've had a rough childhood, and most likely that has enabled you to be very, very good at what you do today, in some way, shape, or form. And you, again, might not fully be there yet, but there is parts of that. And again, that's not to condone what happened, because it's not. But you can choose whether or not you want that what happened to uplift you. You have free will, and you can use that to either allow yourself to be propelled forward or dragged down. And whether you choose one or the other, I love you. Just know that you're loved either or. Number 2, this one is really difficult for me to share because it's for a long time, this held such a deep, it's not guilt or shame. I think I was ashamed of this for a long time. But you have this innate strength in you. You have this power in you. And yet it's like an undercurrent that you just know is there and feel. And you know that you were, quote unquote, born to lead. And in your younger years, I don't know how old you are, but me, I'm almost 43. And I know that in my early 20s, that came out as me just wanting to dominate, manipulate, just having people do what I wanted to do. And it was through the experience that and through my personal work and development that I realized that being a leader means being of service to those that have entrusted you with their trust. And that it's just so. I can't help but laugh when people, they want to be. I wanted to be a CEO or a director of, whatever, for the title, for the image of what it portrayed. And today I understand just how, how much it requires of someone to be a leader, because it's not about you. It's about lifting those that are your quote unquote people. And it's about being of service to me, at least. That's what means being a leader. And if you're someone with a voice and you're someone who speaks, whether it be on a show like this or in your local community or in, a private group or wherever it is, being of service is to me what being a leader is, and being born to lead is. It is to quote unquote break the waves for those that come after. And I've recently, in recent years, actually, I've had, because I thought that this was something quote unquote new, but in the recent years, I've had people from my school. When I went to school in one place from the age of 7 to 16, like for first through 10th grade, and I've had school classmates come up to me and just tell me how much of a protector I was, even as a young child, which I didn't, I never understood or saw that, but I can see how that has been with me throughout. And it's also probably why I was given the role or the blessing of being a big sister. Not that my sister needs me anyway, because she's badass on her own. But I just see that how you can be conditioned, trained as a leader by being a big sister, or by about just taking care of those who are around you. So number 2 was that you were born to lead. The third precursors, one of the third precursors that I'm going to share with you is actually, I was going to say that it's 2 in 1, because to me these two are connected. So first of all, the truth of Mary Magdalene does not come as a surprise to you. So when you find out that all of the ideas of her being a penitent whore, and an outcast, when you realize that she was actually probably the wife, I do believe that she was married, but the wife of Yeshua, the mother of his children, a powerful, powerful teacher on her own, an ascended master, all of these things do not come as a surprise to you. It's more of a, oh yes, it's like a remembrance. It's a remembrance of this, this is how it was. And there's also a deep sense of relief, because the stories that you've heard have not made sense, whether you are someone who's raised within a religion or not. But before that, usually what I see happen is you were called in some way, shape, or form by Yeshua, by Jesus. You're being drawn towards Jesus. And I like to say this because he's like the poster boy. Like he's the jokester. He's like the poster boy for those two. And what I've found is that usually you're called, and this can probably be through either religion in some form. Maybe he just shows up for you as a guide and a teacher. But also I know a lot of people have been called through A Course in Miracles, which is channeled by Yeshua, or are the words and his quote unquote true teachings. And so you're called to that. And once you've gotten familiar with him, once you've gotten used to him, he will then automatically, some way, shape, or form, introduce you to Mary, because those two are inherently connected. I would say you can't have one without the other. They go hand in hand, as they did while they were on earth, and as they do now while they are in the ethers. So the like I said, the truth of who Mary was and is does not come as a surprise to you. It's more of a remembrance, like oh yes, of course. And most likely you're being introduced to her by Yeshua, by Jesus. I once, one of the things that I struggled with in the beginning of this work was that everything that's been done is in his name. Every horrible thing that's been done in his name. And I had trouble forgiving the church, and I had trouble being okay with the church. And I am born and raised in Denmark, so the church to me is the Protestant church here. But really, when I look out on the world, it doesn't really matter whether it's Catholic or Protestant or whatever form of Christianity it is. I see, manipulation, domination, power, fear, money, people being led as sheep, patriarchy, and I'm not digging it. I don't dig it. And I was having, quote unquote, a conversation. I was driving and I was having a conversation with Jesus, and as I was driving, I was passing a church, and I was like, there we go again. Because here in Denmark, we have churches basically on every street corner, even though the churches are empty. People are seeking, but the churches are empty for good reason, if you ask me. And he said, it got my name out. And that was something that really, really resonated with me in terms of it got his name out. Now, of course, it's up to us to clean up the shit that's been going on for the past 2,000 years in his name. And I don't mean by lashing out, but I mean by doing the work of what he truly came to teach us and what she truly came to teach us, that love is the way. And going back to what I said before, love is the way is about taking action, steps based in love, that serves the collective and the whole, not just a certain group of people or you on your own. So yeah, that's what he said. It got my word out. And that's why I call him the poster boy, because he's like, you see him everywhere. And so he's the call for us to return into his teachings, their teachings, into love being source, love being God. It's there. It's quote unquote hidden in plain sight. And that is one, that's so beautiful. Everything is there for you. It's not about finding something outside of yourself. It's not about finding something that was, never there. It's not about returning or finding your home. It's about returning to the place that you never left. It's about lifting the veils that are hindering your sight so that you may see how everything is within. So that was the third precursor. The fourth one that I want to bring up is, and I kind of touched upon this in terms of what is a Magdalene, is that you're someone who, like, when I say you've made the journey from your mind into your heart, it means that you've shifted your focus, and you probably have abandoned a regular or a corporate career like I did. I was a key account manager. I did startups. I was in hotels and in the financial industry. And I left that. That doesn't mean that I've abandoned that part, because I love startups. I love businesses. I love being part of that. I love supporting my one-on-one clients in expanding and growing their businesses, whether they are, within the first 3 to 5 years, or they've been in business for 5 to 10 to 12 years and want to take it further. I love that. But I come from a space of heart, and I come from a space of service. I come from a space of, I want to work with only people who are here to serve the collective. Yes, making money is part of that. But it's not about image or portrayal or like smoke and screen. It's about deep nourishment, satisfaction, joy, things that truly create a transformation. And that's my part of this. That's my part. And so I know that your part of this is, equally as important. And that be whether you are, a baker or a cake maker, whether you are a graphic designer or an accountant or a writer or, an electrician or a, someone who drills holes. I mean, I really want to emphasize that the external appearance of a Magdalene does not look and feel a certain way. It doesn't have to be a teacher or a coach or a healer or within those, because those are the fields that we usually would probably, or at least would look at and say, oh, these are the Magdalenes. But that's not just the case. It can be something that is extremely mundane. It can be a translator. It can be a historian. It can be a chemist or a doctor. There's really no limit to it, but it is the shift within that's the important one. It's when you realize that what you've been doing has probably not been serving the whole or the collective, and your veils have begun lifting, and you have made that journey, or you are making that journey of shifting from fear to love. And so to me, that is another very important precursor and a sign for whether you are a Magdalene or not. And again, you being here, and if you're still here listening to this, let me just, proof, stamped, signed, sealed, delivered. And finally, and I've touched upon this a bit also in the other ones, because they're all intertwined really, is that you hear what people are not saying. You're intuitive. As you do the work, as you do your practices, your intuitive senses are strengthened, but you have an innate ability to quote unquote hear what people are not saying, to there's probably also quote unquote a demand for truth. I know I say quote unquote a lot, but that's because this is on, this is by voice, and some of you are watching the show, but yeah. So there's a demand for truth, while also understanding that your truth is not necessarily someone else's truth, but the importance of truth is that, does it serve the collective, or does it abandon the principles? I would say that there is a shit ton of Christians who abandon principles, who abandon the principles of Yeshua. For example, if we look at something that is very or can be very controversial, which is abortion. I think Denmark was the first country to allow for abortions back in the 70s or even before. We've been the first with a lot of things. But there is if in the U.S. there's a lot of quote unquote Christians. I don't consider them to be. I don't want to say true Christians. I don't even consider them to be Christians, because if love is the way, then why? So in terms of quote abortions, there seems to be this notion that you can't abort a child, but then it kind of stops there. I've seen a lot of rhetoric that then or systems that are then later in place where you don't support mothers, you don't support children, you leave children go unfed, unnourished, and those things are just that doesn't make sense to me. It really does. So like I said, in the idea, in the precursor, that you hear what people are not saying, there's also a quote unquote need for the truth, because you don't understand. If someone is saying, like the example I mentioned before, if you have someone who's in a if you can sense that someone is you can hear what they're not saying, and you can hear what they're saying is not true, then there is an innate desire to know the truth, because you understand that once you know the truth, and once the truth comes out, that actually is very, very freeing and liberating. Speaking your truth is, whether it be quote unquote negative or positive, is extremely healing. I see this in my my Mastery Through Love healing journey that I have for soul-driven, heart-based spiritual entrepreneurs. We have a sacred space that's connected to the work that we do, in which I encourage people to speak their truth, whether, to voice their fears. Because once you begin voicing it, once you begin letting it out, you actually you free it from your space. You leave it, you allow it to be released from your energy and your space, and it can no longer hold you like it could before. So those are 5 precursors that I see. Now, in terms of the third thing that I wanted to talk about, the Magdalene Rising, that is who you are. That's what you're a part of. That is what this podcast is meant to be a beckoning call for, is for you to continue walking the path, for you to continue lifting the veils, for you to continue supporting the healing of yourself and the other and others. And to me, the Magdalene Rising are those of us, and it's not meant to be like, we're not raised above others. We're not more than others. We're just walking a different path than others. And not everyone is on the same path, and that's okay. But to me, the Magdalene Rising is part of the solution. It's those of us who are doing the work on a daily, weekly, monthly, yearly basis of clearing our own shit first, and then becoming a beacon for change, for healing, for awakening, for transformation within our communities, within, our world. And that to me is what the Magdalene Rising is. And there are more and more and more of us who are awakening. And so our job is to support that awakening of others, to hold space as they awaken, as they learn, as they transform, as they heal. And together, that is eventually what is going to be lifting the consciousness of everyone. It's so interesting because about, I would say, 20 minutes before I sat down to record this episode, I had no idea and no clue what I was going to be talking about. But I have learned throughout these 50 episodes, and about, I would say, 20 of them, no, not 20, but probably 15 or something like that, are episodes just with me. I have learned that when I choose to show up, open, unafraid, willing, and committed, dedicated, what is to come through me will come through me. And I think it was just, I said less than 20 minutes before, and less than 5 or 10 minutes before I actually started recording, that the idea started simmering. And I realized that this is what I wanted to talk about today, or share with you today. And that just shows you the beauty of surrender. And I can't help but just revel in over the beauty of how this 50th episode now is named Are You A Magdalene? And how those two things are connected. And that comes through the surrender of, like I said, being willing to show up and just open yourself up. And you can do that as well in your work, no matter what it is, on a daily basis. It is about abandoning fear. It's about dissolving fear by expanding love in your life. And so, as always, I hope that this episode has served you. And I would love, love, love to hear from you. Will you leave me a comment on the blog post that is connected to this episode, and tell me who you are as a Magdalene, so that may inspire others, so that we may see that the world is really a tapestry filled with wonderful, magnificent, amazing people of all different walks of life, of different races, of different faiths, of different genders, of different colors, of different, and how it is through those differences being merged together, not made one, but merged together, that we create this beautiful, beautiful tapestry throughout the world. And I want you to know that as a Magdalene, you form part of a grid that is currently, whether you see it or not, feel it or not, hear it or not, sense it or not, currently is supporting the elevation of all. I love you. Take care. That is what I had for you in today's episode of the Magdalene Voices. For all of the deeds and the details, find the show notes on my website, Mariaestela.com. Know that I would love to hear how it resonated with you and what you got from it. So tag me on Instagram or leave me a comment on either my website or YouTube. Finally, if it served you, please take a moment to share it with a friend or on social media. God bless.